Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, August the 22nd, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for this middle of the week Wednesday. And before the show, Cindy and I were talking about how fun it is to have animals who, right now I have a cat in my lap, and she was insisting on kneading my lap and making sure that everything was just right. And like you pointed out, Cindy, it's not like the lap ever changes. It just continues to be what it is. But oh no, it has to be checked. It has to be looked at carefully.
Right?
And then we commented well, this isn't all that different from what we human beings do, because we do the same thing. We just do it in a more sophisticated way, but it's basically the same activity, right?
Right? It was so funny. I was thinking about my little dog that would walk around in a little circle before she laid down when she was in my office. And I would be watching her, and she's on the carpet, and she's going around in a circle like 100 times before she lays down. And I'm thinking, you're on the carpet, nothing's going to change.
That's right.
And it hit us both at the same time when we were talking about this. It's the same thing people do. We do the same thing. We go around in a lot of circles.
We do. It's crazy.
That's so funny.
I wonder if it's possible to actually find a different aspect to the carpet if you go around it enough times.
I don't know. They might have a sense we don't have, Well,
I'm not so sure we have sense, to be perfectly honest.
I'm saying maybe she was, on to my eye, it just looked like she's going around in a circle. Maybe she's doing some kind of magic conjuring spell or something to change her experience. I don't know what it is.
Well, that's an interesting idea. That actually could be true, because we know that the law of attraction teaches us, and the theories regarding the law of attraction teach us that how we feel plays a major role about what it is that we attract. Maybe that's a way of building up positive feeling. Right.
No, I was not being, I was being serious that her experience is, I'm looking at it from the outside, but she's experiencing something completely different, or was experiencing something completely different. So it's easy for me to look on from the outside and say that it's silly and it's not changing anything. That's another funny thing, because we do that with people too.
Oh, yeah.
Or as people too, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, regularly.
And if we're practicing law of attraction, we may have people in our life that sounds just like what I just said. It's like, well, that's silly. That's not going to change anything.
Well,
I think probably our experience.
Most of us say that just about every day. I mean, I see that all the time on Facebook. People saying, well, I keep doing this law of attraction thing and nothing ever changes. I keep going around and around and nothing ever happens.
It's really true. I mean, it's funny, but it really is true. And our experience is, if everything is created by thought, then the biggest contributions we make to our experience, no one else can see.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing, isn't it? A lot of we don't even see them half the time.
Mm-hmm. I
mean, stuff shows up, and it can be like days before we even notice there's a connection, if at all.
Right. Exactly.
So
it can be longer than days.
I always figure it's a victory if I've noticed that there was something that happened. Because most of the time I'm oblivious. That's the part that really gets me more than anything else. Like, how does all this stuff connect? And I just miss it. But I do.
Or I'll have the experience where I see it like down the road and realize the connection and want to do the face palm,
Yes, right.
Forehead slap. Oh, why didn't I see that? It's right, staring me right in the face.
Yep. Yeah, there's nothing so obvious as the obvious to be ignored.
Well, we do have a lot of things going on in our lives and in the world, and there's a lot of noise.
Yeah, there is.
And a lot of, things that pull our focus away. And focus is so important. Yesterday we were talking about, I don't know if we were on the air, but we were talking about the Wallace Wattles book, The Science of Getting Rich.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I pulled it out yesterday when we were talking about it. And then I was reading it last night. I looked at my book. My book is sort of like, it's an 8x10 size book.
Ooh, wow.
Which I didn't realize it when I bought it.
Yeah,
I like paperbacks because they're sort of compact,
mm-hmm.
and I can throw them in my bag and take them with me or whatever. And when I bought it, I thought it was like the regular size paperback. And when it arrived, it was this huge book. It's not thick. It's just a big book. But it's 3 books in one. And The Science of Getting Rich, I counted last night. It's only 44 pages. I mean, this is something that you can definitely read over and over.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a section that I was reading last night that stood out to me about focusing and thought. And it's kind of what we're talking about now, is how important it is. We talk about it a lot, but it talks about how hard it is. How hard. Let me see. I think I highlighted it. It says, every man has the natural and inherent power to think what he wants to think, but it requires far more effort to do so than it does to think the thoughts which are suggested by appearances.
Yeah, that's a good point.
To think according to appearance is easy. To think truth regardless of appearances is laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work man is called upon to perform. There's no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It is the hardest work in the world. This is especially true when truth is contrary to appearances. Every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form in the mind which observes it, and this can only be prevented by holding the thought of the truth. And that's always been such a powerful paragraph to me, because that's the key. What you'll hear me call it holding the vision, right? Is seeing that thing that no one else can see yet, because we haven't seen it manifest in physical reality yet. But holding the vision of it, it's not easy work.
And yet there's also the flip side of that, which is it's as easy as we decide to make it. And that to me is the biggest irony of them all. It's the paradox, so to speak, of being a deliberate creator. On the one hand, focusing on what we want is truly simple. And in terms of effort, it really doesn't have to require any effort at all. And yet, we turn it into work. And it becomes big work. And most of us experience it as big work. Like a
well, I think most of us
do.
give up before it. In other words, maybe not consciously, not in the sense of saying, okay, I quit, I give up, although people may do that. But it's like anything else. When we start to focus and hold a vision on something, and then something contrary happens, some evidence, some evidence happens that it does not agree with the vision we're holding.
Oh yeah, sure. That's another stumbling stone along the way. But I'm referring directly to what Waddles was saying. I mean, Waddles said very clearly that it's the hardest work that we do.
But he's talking about holding the vision when all the evidence is contrary.
Right.
Not just focusing on what you want.
Exactly.
But focusing on what you want when what is completely something different.
And my point is, the only reason that is hard, and it is hard for all of us that I know of, the only reason that it's hard is we believe it's hard. I mean, if we
tell the story that it's hard.
Yeah, if we believe that it's easy, it becomes easy, which is still mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite sayings is let it be easy.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Let it be easy.
It's very important.
And so I feel like that's the most important, not just the most important ongoing work we do in the process of conscious creating, but it's the most important we do at the onset, because it creates a habit.
Mm-hmm.
And, like anything else, the more we master something, the more often we do it, the more it becomes default, the more habitual it becomes, the easier it is.
Yeah, over time, we can basically bridge the gap between feeling like it's a really, really hard thing to do and turning it into an easy thing to do.
Well, and when it starts becoming easy, that's when things just start manifesting.
Oh, yeah, right. Exactly. Like, oh, geez, get out of the way. Whoa, look out.
Yeah, because it just starts happening really quickly.
Right.
So I love that idea that it actually has brought, some comfort to me in the past, that it's not automatically always easy for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, when we're looking out and we see things happening for other people, and we don't feel like they're happening for us, sometimes that's the story we start telling.
Right. Well, I like the fact that you said it brings comfort, because that's really what you're looking for at that point. You're looking for something to feel better about. Like, oh, they're getting what they want. I'm not getting what I want. I need some way to justify that. So I need to feel better about it. I got to get comforted for it. And
Yeah.
that's a normal thing. That's
Relief.
really very common. Sure. Relief.
Relief.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when we have chronic pain, even if it's very, very low level, it's an energy drain. It will just wear you out over time. But so will chronic financial stress, even if it's not huge, even if it's not abject poverty, but it's just stress, chronic stress in a relationship, all those, even when it's not the worst abusive relationship, ever, but it's just a stressful, all of those low level things that we tolerate. That's the word, that we tolerate, really are energy drains.
We are.
And we start to become tired. And the one thing that we want and need at that point is relief. And sometimes that's the best thing to look for. Instead of, some huge manifestation, is just finding relief.
Well, exactly. Anything that improves the situation somewhat. The final goal may not have been achieved. The final thing that you're trying to attract may not be there yet. But if you can get to a more relieved place, now you're in a better space to attract it and actually receive it.
I feel like we talked about this like months and months ago, a long time ago. And was relief the word that we did not find on the emotional scale?
It might have been.
There was a word, and we were like, we wonder where it is, and we looked, and it wasn't on the scale at all. And I feel like it might have been the word relief.
Well, now you got me wondering. I'm going to go look while we're talking.
Well, I think that relief is an excellent feeling or experience to actually practice. So if you think of a time when, I remember telling this story before, I think I wrote about it. One of my sons was a pro cyclist or semi-pro cyclist at the time, and I was out of the state, all the way on the other side of the country.
Wow.
And I opened Facebook one morning and I saw someone that I knew posting, someone locally to me where I live now, posting, does anybody know the name of the rider that was hit on River Road this morning, of the cyclist that was hit on River Road? And that was the road where my son trained.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so panic ensued. My heart was racing, and I called his cell phone and there was no answer. And so I called the house and there was no answer. And I finally called his brother cell phone, and his brother said, yeah, he already finished all his training this morning and he was out on River Road and he is in the shower right now and he's safe, no incident. And I immediately felt relief, just a sigh of relief. Of course, then I felt angry that some hit and run driver left another cyclist on the road.
Yeah.
And so then I started researching about that and found out that someone did find him and he was in the hospital and he was going to be okay. And I felt relief again, right? So
good.
But if you can think of a time when, like this story, where you felt relief, you can understand the feeling and take a moment to appreciate it, but also to kind of memorize that feeling of relief and what goes on in the body when we feel relief. Like I noticed that we've talked about this so much, right? Holding your breath and then, and those are all things that we can actually do consciously when we're in a moment where we need some relief.
Yeah. Sure.
We don't have to wait for like the tide to change. We can say, oh, I'm going to find that feeling now.
It's true. It's true. By the way, I looked at the list. You're right. Relief is not on the list. Belief with a B is on the list. It's on the number 4 position. But relief with an R is not there. And as I'm looking at the list, because they have it written out the way they have it in the book, Asking It Is Given, it occurs to me what there really needs to be is like one of those shaded graduated color arrows pointing upward with relief in the middle of it, so that as you're moving up the scale, you're getting relief. It doesn't
Oh, you are
necessarily,
so right. I love this idea.
you
It's
know,
not really, yes.
it's not a point on the scale; it's a direction.
Yes. Brilliant. That's right. That is so true. As we move up the scale, that is what we experience.
Right.
Relief.
Yeah.
And also
that's it.
resistance goes away, melts away.
Well, that ought to be
That's
the down arrow. The down arrow is resistance. So, like on the left-hand side, you have an arrow going down that says resistance, and on the right-hand side, an arrow going up that says relief.
I have this sense that you're going to make this chart.
Yeah, I think we already did. we just created it. It hasn't manifested necessarily, but we just created it.
I love it. It's so true, and it's such a good picture of exactly what happens. And it happens, it's not just a thought process, it affects our body and our physiology, right? Like everything else, we start making brain chemicals that cause sensations in the body, and some of them aren't healthy. Chronic stress is not good for our health.
No, really? I hadn't heard that.
So we need relief. We need relief.
You mean there's not Dr. Feelbad saying take your daily dose of
Dr.
stress?
Feelbad. Well, probably so. I would think so. But I'm thinking, it's funny. Like if you did a simple exercise of, I've seen this before, but like holding something in your hand with your arms straight out, and it's like it doesn't have to be heavy. It can be a coffee cup or a book. Anything. You're just holding it, and for the first few seconds, it's not hard. It's easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you keep going, and at some point, that thing might as weigh 20 pounds. It's just like impossible to hold it out any longer.
You don't even have to hold something out. Just hold your hand out. You don't. There doesn't have to be anything in the hand.
So we need relief, and that's the thing. Is that over time, and so important to practice holding the vision, holding those thoughts, and really being able to see what you're seeing and feel it and experience what it would be like and be grateful for it, even in the presence of evidence that would say it's not true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's actually there are a number of groups of people who are good at this. One of them is the group we talked about yesterday. Very wealthy people. Very wealthy people are very good at holding in their mind, even against what the current evidence is, what it is that they want. That's one of the ways that they're able to stay consistent enough to manifest this huge pile of money they got.
It's interesting. Yesterday we were talking about billionaires,
mm-hmm.
and we were talking about philanthropy.
Right.
And after the podcast, I went into the other room, and of course I'm always greeted with coffee and good morning and how was the podcast?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you and me, except for I don't do the coffee, but otherwise it's the same thing.
And I said the podcast was great. And I said in a nutshell, I said we were talking about billionaires and philanthropy, and I said the thing that really hit me during the podcast was sometimes when I think of, charity and giving, I think of giving to people that are in need.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's because when I'm able to give, that's some of what I might do, right? But I started thinking during the call yesterday, during the podcast, of all the ways that I benefit from people that are generous. And when I said that, he said, "Oh, well, did you mention the gorgeous theater that we were at last night?" Because I told you we went to see the band The Fix.
Right.
And I said, no, I didn't even think of that. But the beautiful theater that we were in and the museum that's attached to it. And we started talking. So see, I get to have the podcast with you. And then when I get done, I get another, half hour.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
Great conversation about. And that's what I started thinking about. I know in the conversation yesterday, we talked about NPR.
Mm-hmm.
So we have public radio. And then I think you might have brought up public TV. Yeah, because then we were talking about Downton Abbey.
Right.
And how much we love that show. And I said, wow, I never would have even thought that I was enjoying that show because of someone's generosity.
Mm.
And then we started talking about other things like, he said, well, what about all the art museums? Well, art and music, the art and music that we enjoy definitely would not exist without generosity from people that support all sorts of endowments for the arts.
Absolutely.
Patrons of the arts.
Oh, yeah.
And then like we have a program here, two programs that came to mind right away, the Baton Rouge Area Foundation and Baton Rouge Green, which Baton Rouge Green, a program that plants trees everywhere. People donate trees. And so I thought, gosh, as we walk through the city on a day and we enjoy the museums and the art and all the trees and public TV and radio and like all of these things are the result of someone being generous.
Mm-hmm.
And they all affect us. Like we enjoy them all. They all benefit me. I just had never really thought about that before. Not in the way that I'm thinking about it now.
And how does it feel now? What's the impact now?
Well, I guess I'm just making that connection. The whole reason why we decided to talk about this is because we had talked about it privately and realized it was important.
Yes.
And thought we need to bring this to our listeners because we're talking about money and money stories and how we feel about money, how we feel about rich people, making air quotes, and making that connection to me that there is so often a story that we hear, kind of a trope that we experience, people talking about rich people, people with wealth, not being the kind of people that we want to be. I wasn't going to use any of the slurs that you usually hear, but just, evil rich people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And yet rich people are making it possible for me to enjoy a lot of things. Yes. And you too, and everyone around us, right? And making that connection was sort of powerful for me because I thought, wow, okay, look at all these things that I'm enjoying in my life that are a direct reflection of people that have wealth and are generous with it. I was thinking about billionaires that are just beloved. I thought of 3 of them yesterday, just right off the bat. Oprah Winfrey,
mm-hmm.
J.K. Rowling,
mm-hmm.
and then Julie Louis-Dreyfus, who I don't think is a billionaire, but her father's a billionaire.
Uh-huh.
She's a millionaire.
Yeah.
And how much joy they bring to the world.
Oh, yeah.
With their work and with their generosity. J.K. Rowling I think she's fallen off the billionaire list because she's given so much of it away.
Oh, has she really? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And so for me, that was just kind of big. It's like, in other words, it's not something that I didn't know before, but it's something that consciously I didn't have a consistent awareness of. And now I do. Now I feel like I'll have an even bigger appreciation and gratitude, not only for those things that I enjoy and benefit from, but that I make the direct connection.
Yeah, it's important to do.
Yeah.
It's really important because when we do that, then now we're in a more relieved space, really. We're talking about relief versus resistance. When we focus that way, we actually climb the scale without actively trying to focus on climbing the scale, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I also think that sometimes we lose sight of the idea that when in this discussion of sort of money, is money good or bad? Is money, and we know it's neutral. It's whatever we make it.
Right.
But that every single thing in our experience, most of the time, is connected to money somehow.
Yeah, pretty much. There isn't a whole lot that isn't.
Yeah, I mean, as I go through my day today, the food that I eat, the clothes that I wear, the desk that I'm sitting at, the computer that I'm using, the phone that I'm using, all these things, they're all possible because of money. Mm-hmm. They've generated work, employment for people. they are part of the process of commerce. And so for me, I can be thankful for all those things and recognize how good that money has been.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. In fact, we can even look at you've already started looking at some of the people who have contributed in ways that go beyond the money. And I can think of a few more off the top of my head. I don't know if we mentioned him yesterday, but Ralph Lauren, the fashion guy, right? This is a guy
Right?
who has contributed tremendous amounts to the world in terms of not just fashion, but clothing. I mean, he has clothed the world. That's not too far of a stretch to say that. And as a result, he's wealthy. He's a billionaire. He's a very big billionaire. He's pretty high up on the list.
Oh, wow.
George Lucas, who made the Star Wars films and the Indiana Jones films, gave the world tremendous entertainment, fabulous entertainment, and it just keeps generating income for him. And that's how he becomes a billionaire out of it. But look at all of the inspiration that comes out of those films. Look at all of the people who they can't get enough of it because it lifts them up. It makes them feel good, which is exactly what entertainment is supposed to do. Steven Spielberg, same thing. He's also a multi-billionaire. The films, he's probably like the best director in history. I don't think there's anybody who's ever been better than Spielberg in terms of being able to tell a story. And all they're doing is telling stories, but telling stories in a way that also happens to make them rich. Well, we can also look at other billionaires who contribute all kinds of things that aren't as sexy, that aren't as spectacular. For instance, most people don't think about it, but when someone has a lot of money, they usually don't keep it as money. It's not like their bank account has, $500,000 in it or $500 million or whatever it is. They don't store it in the bank. Wealthy people don't store their money in the bank. They put it into things. They'll invest in real estate. They'll invest in businesses. They'll invest in a whole bunch of things. And because they own the assets, they own the assets behind those businesses, that's where their wealth is. But their wealth is playing all kinds of roles in not just the economy, but in the livelihood and the well-being of the entire population of the planet when you add it all up. So
yeah, well, you were talking about yesterday. You mentioned Larry Ellison from Oracle, and there's all the other Bill Gates and
right.
all the other tech people, right? That, oh my goodness, talk about things we enjoy and feel like we can't live without, and probably take for granted, but don't realize how much goes on behind the scenes in technology that makes our life better every day.
Even as I said, well, they invested in real estate, people give that a shrug, like, oh, yeah, well, they're just in the real estate for the money. Well, so are you. You're in your job for the money, but you're probably also in it for other things, too. It's not your only motivation. And one of the big things about being in real estate is because of all these big, wealthy people who are in real estate, we have office buildings to go to work in. We have homes to live in. I mean, real estate plays a major role in our lives and in a very, very positive way. So thank goodness that they've got all this money into real estate so that we can benefit from it. Because, I mean, where would we be without farms, for instance? Somebody's got to pay for the farm. Well, thank goodness there are people who pay for the farm. Do they make money off of it? Yeah, they do. But that's okay because we need the food. We need the place to live. We need the place to go to work. We need the places to be in, to shelter ourselves from storms, to do all the things that we do with buildings and real estate. So we can shrug off real estate all we want to as, oh, well, that's just a way to make money. But the simple fact is they are providing really important services that just don't get any attention.
It's so interesting how everything intertwines and how our stories about all of these things, that's the part that directly actually connects it all right to us.
It does.
How are you connected to all these things? The story that you're telling. And so it's so important to tell a better story about money, about wealth, about what it can, how it benefits us. Not how it can benefit us. It's not how money could benefit me if I had some.
Right.
It's how is money already benefiting us?
Yes.
Every day.
That's how we change our story. I mean, we're in the process of changing it right now just by recognizing all of the good stuff that happens because wealthy people invest in it. Yeah. That is changing the story.
like we wouldn't be doing this podcast if it weren't for everything that's happened prior in the world, in technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny to think back, if you're old enough, right, to the day when there were no podcasts,
Right.
There were no computers. We didn't have quite this level of ability to connect with people on the other side of the world or the other side of the country or the other side of the city in such an easy way. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's hard to remember now, but podcasts didn't exist in the 20th century. There were 0 podcasts in the 20th century.
Amazing.
Because the iPod hadn't even been invented yet, and that's the origin of the podcast.
That's right. Personal on demand.
Yep.
Right?
There it is. Speaking of which, by the way, something else that we have to recognize and appreciate. You mentioned that we wouldn't have a podcast without the technology, which is true. We wouldn't also have the podcast without the love of doing it, which is really the big factor. But we also wouldn't have as much fun doing the podcast without the listeners. And our listeners are fabulous. That's I keep marveling at the fact that not only do we have loyal listeners, but that the number continues to grow and it continues to spread. And I mean, that just makes the whole experience so much better. And it makes my story about the podcast so much better. And so, I mean, I'm just very appreciative. I do want to ask our listeners to, help tell the story, because we all have that story to tell, right? We all need to get more into the habit of telling the story about the things we like in life. Well, I'm going to ask you right now, you like the stories that you pick up from the podcast. You like the way that you feel when you listen to the podcast. Other people would like to have that feeling too. And they aren't necessarily people that you know, but they do need to know about it so that they can check it out and decide whether they want to become subscribers. So we want to ask you to do 2 things. First of all, we want you to go onto your favorite social media channel and just say something about how you were listening to loatoday.net or something to that effect, and include the phrase loatoday.net. It doesn't really matter whether or not your immediate friends, so to speak, the people who've liked your page or whatever, see it. That's not the point. The point is that when we do that, there is a larger, you could really call it a law of attraction activity going on that dispenses and disperses the message to a much wider range than we could ever possibly see. And when you do put out a message like that, it's not only an airy-fairy law of attraction thing, it's also a practical thing. It's the way social media, search and all that kind of thing work. They actively push information to people who are ready to receive it based on their interests. And so if there's somebody out there who's interested in law of attraction in one way or another, they're much more likely to find out about it simply because you posted something about loatoday.net. So please do take a moment to go post something on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever it is that you use, and share with whoever happens to see your message, because that's a really great thing that you'll do. The second thing I want you to do, if you're not yet a subscriber, is to become a subscriber. And that's also really, really easy to do. You just go to the homepage of the website at loatoday.net, and the instructions are right there. There's actually a link you can click right there that for most people will just automatically set them up to subscribe. Android users may find that they don't have a podcast software built in already, or they haven't previously installed a podcast app. But that's pretty easy to fix. You just go to the Play Store, right? You go to the Play Store and look for Podcast or Podcast Manager or something like that, and you'll get a whole list of podcast apps that you can plug in. Some of them are free too. We list a few of them on the homepage of our website, so you can check there for some suggestions. But once you install that, then you can use that to do the search for LOA Today, and pop, there we are. So please take a moment to subscribe and share the fact that you've subscribed and that you're a listener, so that more and more people can find out about it, because we want the entire world to find out about just how great not only it is to listen to the podcast, but how great it is to change the story. Changing the story starts here, and we want you to be a part of it.
Wonderful. And reach out and connect,
Yes.
Like, you can call us, you can email us, use the contact form at loatoday.net. Find us on social media, because what we'd really enjoy is to hear your thoughts.
Yes,
and
much.
Hear what's coming up for you in your mind as you hear these conversations, because we want to enter into a conversation with you and want you to be part of our conversation, whether you call in and actually speak to us or whether you give us some feedback or let us know just how these conversations affect you. That's always really important to me, and it makes my day too. So reach out and say hello.
And by the way, Patty Framo, who does the Monday afternoon podcast with me, made a really good point. You can also call in if you want a little coaching. I mean,
Yes.
we can certainly help you through some stuff. We kind of skipped that part. I think we co-hosts kind of like assume, oh, well, somebody who wants some coaching can call in, but we never actually say it. So we should probably say, hey, if you want to be coached, come, give a call. We love to give advice, right?
Yeah, we would love to. And I think that would be something that would benefit not just you by calling in and and having a conversation, but it would benefit other people that were listening. So it's always a win-win when you do any kind of live coaching where other people can hear.
Oh yeah, the ripple. Talk about ripple effect. The ripple effect that comes from hearing what another person is getting help with is incredible. I mean,
some of us feel really shy about talking about personal things, in a public way. I mean, I say some of us because that's me. I'm sort of a very private person a lot of the time.
Isn't that ironic? Because I'm the same way, and here we are doing a podcast.
Right. What has helped me with that, and what I've recognized over the years is that no matter what experience, you communicate, we always feel like, oh, no one's had this experience. Yes. No one's going through this but me. But there's always people that hear the story that are like nodding their head and saying, I went through something exactly like that. Right. And so it's always a benefit to more than just the person, bringing it up.
I believe the hashtag these days is Me Too, right? Isn't that what it is?
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I've never been to an ABE meeting, but
you haven't? Yeah.
I have not. And I know that's got to be the case. I mean, I have listened to them and watched them, and, someone will come up with something that they're struggling with, and plenty of people are helped by the answer. That's why their YouTube videos and their books sell so well, and they're so popular, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the fact is that, when you watch a YouTube video of a workshop, it's very, very similar to what happens at the workshop. I mean, the only thing that's different is it's a different person in the chair asking a slightly different question from their own perspective.
Slightly different question, right?
But it's always the same answer anyway, so it's not all that different.
I love that they say that. We're going to tell you the same
thing,
answer.
Right? It's fun. Plus, also the opening monologue that Abraham does is always a fun monologue because they always have ways to it. It's pretty clear. It's a lot more clear when you're actually at the event that what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the entire room's vibration raised, which is very consistent. There are a lot of people who engage in interacting with the world of spirit in a wide variety of different ways. I mean, there are psychics and there are mediums, and I mean, there are all kinds of practices, right? But all of them have one thing in common. They all want to raise their vibrational level before they do their work. Kind of related to what Abraham talks about, how if you segment intend something, you want to get yourself into that high vibrational place and think about how wonderful it's going to be for whatever it is you're going to be doing and that kind of thing before you do it, so that you can get the maximum result out of it. Well, that's what Abraham is doing at the beginning. They're basically telling a funny monologue in order to get everybody laughing so that the vibration level raises.
So smart. I remember when I was in coaching school that one of the things that was actually part of the curriculum was learning how to get centered and to have a high vibration, a very high energy level. And I don't mean energy level like Energizer Bunny energy, hopped up on caffeine energy level. That's not what I mean when I say a high energy level. I'm talking more about the energy that's attached to the emotional scale, that kind of level. Mm-hmm. I mean, we learned that was something necessary to do in the moments, 10 minutes or whatever it is for individuals. It's personal, but that moment of time before we start coaching someone.
Yeah, that's
So
pretty critical,
important.
isn't it? Because the person you're coaching really can't benefit until they've raised their own vibration level. That's a really good point.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why, I mean, coaches, we all have different, our own style and our own method. But one of the things I know that I always want to do is start off a coaching session talking about what's going right.
Mm-hmm. It's one of my
And there's
favorite things to do in a Facebook group. Somebody raises, inevitably, somebody is posting something about how, they can't get themselves into a better place. They can't get the boyfriend back. The money isn't coming. All the things aren't going right in their lives. And inevitably, as soon as I read all that, the very first thing I think to post is something along the lines of, so what's going right? And it shakes up the mind. It shakes up because basically I just ruined the negative story, right?
Well, that's the whole, we started right there this morning with talking about being able to hold the vision.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens when we don't? That's what happens. All of a sudden we're going off the rails with this story of what is and all those things. And we can talk about those so easily just all day long.
So when we shake
Until
that
someone
up,
breaks the pattern and says, "But let's talk about what's going right."
And then all of a sudden it's like, but I don't know what to say about that.
But wait, I was on a roll.
Yeah, right. You're interrupting my complaint stream here. What is wrong with you?
I read an article that I have to mention because you just used the word complaint and complaint stream. And it's an article that was in the news a few days ago that actually said that science has proven that when we complain or when we chronically complain, that the part of the brain that we use to solve problems begins to shrink.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
And so what hit me was the idea, because we talk about this a lot, right? Focusing on the solution.
Yep.
Being solution focused instead of focusing on the problem. It's not just a cliche. It's not just, a little piece of advice. It's when we keep focusing on the problem, no matter how small the problem is.
Yeah, isn't
right?
that interesting?
I mean, think about the times that we complain about things that aren't really a big deal. I caught myself yesterday complaining about something that really was not a big deal, and I wasn't even making a big deal out of it. You know what I'm saying? I was just going, oh yeah, blah blah blah, right? It's just and just complaining, and I caught myself. I thought, ooh, why am I doing that? I don't want to do that, because when we are complaining, we are actually shutting down the part of our brain that finds solutions.
You were talking earlier about how we, one of the best ways that we can feel relief is by simply expressing relief. And I realized that has become something of a go-to for me. And at first I was going to say, oh, geez, it's a negative focus. But as I thought about it, I realized, no, it's a refocusing on positive. I'll run into some situation that's not good. It doesn't have to be major. Just, it's an unpleasant situation in some way, something I don't like about it. And I'll go, oh. Now, I would have said at first that was me focusing on negative. But in the context of what you said earlier, that's me releasing. That's me saying, I want to let go of that stress. I want relief.
Yeah. We talked about one time about how animals will shake.
Yes.
And people generally don't, but it would be really good for us if we did.
We'd probably get a headache, but
because we hold all this tension.
Yeah.
I mean, it's little, it's small tension, but it builds up because we hold on to it in a chronic way. And so, it's kind of like when you're in the financial situation where, do your bills get paid? Yes. My bills always get paid. So I'm not in the place where I might lose my house or something. My bills get paid, but just barely, right? Or we just always make it. When you're in that position for a long time, you can say, well, my bills were always paid. I always paid all my bills. But there's that chronic stress of making it just barely.
Yeah. Oh,
or when you're in a relationship where it's not terrible, but there's tension, right? sometimes we hold on to those small tensions, and animals just get up and shake. They shake their body. They throw that tension off. And so like you going, oh, like that's a physical action that gives you some relief.
It's true. And once I recognized it that way, it felt better.
Because it's so funny, you were talking about laying down on the floor.
Yes, right.
The other day.
You told me it was a yoga position. I have to admit, I almost fell on the floor when you said that. I didn't laugh out loud, but it's like, you got to be kidding me. Lying on the floor is a yoga position?
Yeah. It's called Shavasana. In Sanskrit, it means corpse pose. But because you're as still as you can be. And you're not exerting any energy. And you're letting the earth support you. Well, what's so funny is that, as usual, after the podcast that day, I mentioned that. I said that I had told you it was a yoga pose. And I said, Walt was explaining how he will lay on the floor and just totally relax and let the floor support him. And he said he prefers a carpeted floor. And the response I got was, what? No, the linoleum or the tile. It's actually ceramic. He said the linoleum. I mean, the cold tile in the kitchen. That's where I like to do that. And I was like, what? I had never noticed it, but like there's lots of times when I'll be in there like doing something and he will just come in and lay down on the cold tile floor and just
Well, my only response is to each his own. That's good.
It made me laugh. I thought, oh my gosh, you do the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, lying down on a tile, that's like, no, thank you. Just, poke me in the eye with a stick while you're at it.
Well, that's because it's not 101 degrees there, and you come in from outside and the cold tile floor feels really good.
Well, I suppose that's true. That's what I think a cold shower is for, but I understand your point, yes.
So relief.
Relief is very, very big, yeah. And every time that we relieve our stresses, every time that we find, even if it's in like a, oh, geez, if it's something like that, well, it's still relief. And we got to give ourselves credit for it. Like, hey, we just moved slightly up the scale. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's it. And that's the thing that I think is really important to recognize when you're in those places where maybe things aren't, where you're having a little trouble holding the vision because of the evidence that's showing up, is just turn it around. Get yourself a little bit of relief.
It's really about learning to pay attention to all of the little things that are good that happen. And I suppose that's one reason why many of us are a little bit envious of, say, a billionaire, somebody with lots of money, because we kind of put into our own mind, well, heck, if you got all that money, you got nothing to worry about, right? You're in a great place. Everything's going to go swimmingly and smoothly, and it doesn't really matter whether that's true, because there are plenty of stories of people who are wealthy who have health problems or relationship problems or problems with the law or whatever else. But the point is, regardless of that side of it, the perception that we have is that it's better. It would be better if we had all the money because then we could relax more. Mm-hmm. And the good news is, well, now that we recognize that, we don't have to wait for the money to come in. We can actually relax now. We don't have to wait for the money to come in so we can just say, oh, well, now I can relax. That's good news.
What I noticed too in coaching people is that sometimes we've connected a whole bunch of things to when I get money. And in other words, I remember a story about, asking the question, what would you do? You think if we're thinking that life would be so much better if we had much, much more money, what are some of the things you would do? And the list of things was a list that some of the things, yes, would take money. Like I would travel around the world. I would buy a much nicer car. I would buy a bigger house. Like those things are going to probably most of the time take money. But there were a bunch of other little things interspersed in there. Mm. I would write a book. I would, and I was noticing that some of these things can be done right now.
Yeah.
And so it's important to make that distinction as well, that most of it some of it, at least, we don't have to wait for. And the feelings we never have to wait for. We can have the feelings right now.
The feelings thing is something I've been thinking about a lot over the years, but particularly in the last week or so, because, well, there are two parts to this. The first part is I can remember back when I felt like I had no control over my feelings at all, and we've talked a lot about that kind of thing. And there are plenty of people who have that experience. I was actually corresponding with somebody on Facebook who says she never feels anything, and I felt bad for her in one sense, and in another sense, I was thinking, she could really feel those feelings. I wonder how I can best suggest it. And she was giving so much resistance on so many different levels that I realized I probably couldn't do anything over Facebook.
It's probably just because preferences have been denied for
so
long.
Yeah, exactly. Huge amounts of denial of preferences. So I ended up making some suggestions about people to talk to locally and to reach out to, because I could tell, excuse me, I could tell she needed to have that direct contact with people, whether it be a therapist or a coach or a friend or somebody to interact with. That's what she really needed to kind of break the mold, so to speak. But in the process of exploring that, I was also noticing in myself, I have over the years gotten better and better at believing and at applying the idea that I can influence and, in effect, control my feelings. I get to choose what I'm going to feel. Like most people, I still stumble a lot. I still have times where I feel like I just can't get there. I most recently noticed it when we were talking about the equivalence between bliss and appreciation, and how, in Abraham's view, appreciation is bliss, which was not what I'd previously experienced. So once again, reminded that there's a way that I have not yet totally gotten myself to the place where I can get to the feeling place I want to be in and actually feel it. And yet I also look back at the progress I've made. So I lay this out as a way of kind of laying out the playing field, and to provide that as a way of a sort of a foundation for saying I have made progress. And I'm continuing to make progress. We have all made progress. We continue to make progress. And we want to get to the point where we can have that breakthrough, so to speak. We express the breakthrough in terms of having more money or better health or better relationships. But you know what, Cindy? At the bottom line, what the real breakthrough is being able to get to the point where we can just leap right up into that good feeling place whenever we want to, under any circumstance. And that's what all the processes are for. That's what all the disciplines are for. That's what the meditating is for, and the affirmations and the vision boards and the favorite activities and all that. That's what all of it's for, is to get ourselves into that better feeling place. We are beings who are trying to learn how to get to, and as much as possible, stay in that highest level place we could be at. Because when we get there, that's when all the good things happen. So, like for instance, we're talking about billionaires. Billionaires broke through and said, you know what? I'm going to feel good about money right now. And I'm going to get excited, not just about money, but about the thing I'm doing that's going to lead to the money. And I'm going to get so excited, and I am excited. And wow, I can hardly get going. I can hardly wait to get going. I want to create the building. I want to create the heart valve. I want to create the book about Harry Potter. I want to create, the fashion. I want to create whatever it is that I am really into creating. And I'm just going to go after it in a big way. And, oh, by the way, now I'm feeling really, really good.
Well, that's interesting that you connected those two things, because inspiration, inspired action. Probably most of those people were not creating the thing because of the end goal of wealth.
Right. Oh yeah. That was like incidental.
So, part of inspired action with us is understanding what lights us up. Being aware of, and it sounds funny because it's like, oh, well, of course we know the things that we enjoy and the things we don't. But how many times do we tolerate being in a place where we're just grinding through the day on things we don't enjoy? And, you may be in a place where you don't enjoy what you do for a living or your particular circumstance there. And, it's not like you can just walk away. But you can start taking the steps to be able to go to some different experience.
Yeah, it can be done. We can start dreaming the new dream, and we can start
Yes,
living that
yes,
dream. We can actually experience that dream in our minds and in our conversations with others.
yes. Telling a new story, dreaming a new dream. I love that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, and telling a different story about the money that we do have,
Mm-hmm.
and telling a different story about money in general, which is what we're doing with what we've been doing. But especially with the last two podcasts where we've been talking about how we view money as a whole, money in society, people that have a lot of money, what money does for us,
And I'm
recognizing all the ways that we enjoy other people's generosity.
yeah. And I'm like most people. I get stuck on, well, I don't see how the money's going to come in. You know, I make my plans, but my plans are limited. I don't know how to get to the point where I really need to be. And that's a common mistake, really. It's a common mistake that so many people make. I make it. I know lots of other people do too. But the fact is, we have to recognize it's a mistake. And once we recognize that it's a mistake, then at least we have a beginning point for telling the new story. We have to let go of the how-tos, or what Mike Dooley calls the horrible hows. And they are horrible because when you're stuck in the middle of them, there's no way out. You just can't see any way out when you're in the middle of that. But when you recognize that that is a horrible how and you can just let it alone, you may not know what the next step is for the new story. But the one thing that I do know is you just start telling a story that's positive and you'll eventually get there.
Yeah, it either feels better or it doesn't.
Yeah, better or worse? Better or worse? Which is it?
Better or worse? Yeah. Well, I think that one thing all of us learn as we go through this journey is that that the universe is always going to come up with a better how than the one we thought of anyway.
True. Yeah. And that's what we're learning to trust, really. We're learning to trust, the universe is going to be able to do this better than I can. Am I willing to trust that? And the initial reaction is, hell no! No way. I know how to do this better than the universe. We want to be in that total control. But over time, we get enough experiences where the universe does deliver better than what we had in mind. And, oh, yeah, I guess the universe is better at it than I am. Well, the good news is that means I can start letting go of having to decide how it's going to work. That's a good thing.
I like to tap into the energy of curiosity on that. And consciously be curious about how it's going to happen. You know, like, I wonder how this is going to unfold.
Oh, I see. In other words, not how you're going to do it, but how it's going to just happen, how the universal forces are going to make it happen.
Right. Just like, you know, I know what I want to have happen, but I'm not sure how, and that's okay. I don't need to know the how. I don't need to know.
That's a good point. Yeah. Like, I'm not really sure how all of the new people are going to find our podcast so that the numbers keep growing and more people find it. But it is kind of fun to think, geez, I wonder how they're going to do it.
I wonder all the different ways that people will find us.
I mean, they may find us through actually seeing a social media post. They may find us through something that got connected to that post in some way in the background through the programming that we don't know about. They may find out about us because of some offline conversation. By the way, I listened to this thing.
We can brainstorm and think of 50 ways they'll find us, and then we'll hear the stories later of how they did, and all those stories will be much
they'll
more
all come true.
Magical than anything we could think of.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, well, yeah. Some of the things that happen are just mind-boggling when they happen. Like, I don't. There's no explanation for that one. I don't know how that happened.
Those are the best.
They are the best. They are. Well, this has been good. I mean, I think we're going to continue this conversation in some ways going on. I mean, we may shift up the topic a bit, but I'm glad we've been focusing on billionaires and millionaires and wealthy people and doing it in a positive way. I think it's been a good shift. And I also want to take a moment to ask you, for somebody who's looking perhaps at breaking their own pattern where this kind of thing is concerned, that's where a coach can come in. What's the best way to reach out to you as a coach?
They can find me online at cindychavez.com, CINDIECHAVEZ.com. And then there's also same name all over social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. So come find me, say hello. All
right, great. Well, it's been great. I look forward to talking to you again this afternoon. We get to do 2 in one day, a twofer.
Yay!
How about that? That's a good thing. We hope that you'll join us as well next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.